Okay, so this begins a little mini series of videos I'm going to do about Dodge pickups from the 70s and what the differences are. I decided to do this video simply because suddenly I had a whole variety of them on the yard within the last month. And some are still here: 72, 73, 74, 76, 77, 78, and an 80. That covers quite a bit of the variety. In addition to the variety that I currently have, I've got all kinds of stuff, parts over the years I've gathered up. Some I still have, some I've sold. So I think I've developed a fairly good knowledge base, and I want to pass that on. This is going to be the same intro for all the videos. So if you're watching this and it's not the first one, then go back and check out my channel or the playlist that I hopefully will set up, and then you can watch all of them. I'm going to try to keep them in that 10 to 15 minute range, so I really don't know how many I'm going to have. I might have 2, I might have 15. Well, I won't have 15. I might have like 4, something like that. It kind of depends. So, but I'm going to do it in a logical manner as best I can. So the logical progression and the way these videos are going to work, the way I'm going to put them up, is how you would encounter a vehicle, whether it's online or whether you see one sitting on the side of the road for sale. Exterior first, what are the differences? Then you would probably get inside, check out the cab, then that's going to be the next thing, the interior. Then underneath the hood, the various differences under the hood. And then the last part would be mechanical and miscellaneous oddball things. Not so much mechanical, because most of the mechanical changes are going to be purely option driven, and I'm not going to get deep into options and packages and stuff like that. I'll mention some of the things, but I'm not going to get into this year had this option, this one had this, because that changed way too much. And with pickups, it was, and actually anything in the 70s really, the whole deal was if you could pay for it, the factory would make it for you. And I have seen some really weird stuff that was not, quote, available, but yet somehow was available. So I'm not, like I say, I'm just not going to get into that part of it. So here's something that I think really needs to be mentioned the way I'm doing this video. You're not going to see pristine vehicles. You're not going to see the show trucks. I'm dealing with just old, sometimes quite beat up trucks, original stuff that I don't believe has been changed or modified. In some cases, maybe never even worked on a day in its life in the last 40, almost 50 years on some of these things. The reason for that is simple. I want to know the way it was when it left the factory, and that's what I'm trying to show to you, is the way it left. Now, a nice show truck, it could be 100% perfect as factory, but I don't know that because so many of these parts are so similar, you won't notice. And I'll show you, especially when I start talking about the pickup boxes. There are a lot of differences in the boxes over the years, way more than I ever realized until, again, like I say, I started looking at them and realizing that, oh, this is different, that's different, and then really started looking at all the differences that there are. So you can see a bunch of beat up rusty things. You can see stuff like this: busted windshield, rust on it, whatever, trashy or rat infested interiors. But so long as the pieces are original, that's what I'm going for. That's what you're going to see. So please keep that in mind. Don't diss the trucks. They are what they are. Welcome to the next part in this series of the Spotter's Guide for the 72 to 80 Dodge pickups. This time it's mechanical. And I will admit some of it's pretty dry and boring because it's mechanical and it's things that really have little influence on what the truck looks like. But some, I guess, interesting stuff for someone like me who's a little bit, easily wrapped up in, getting, looking at details off in the weeds and stuff like that. So, yeah, enjoy. Hopefully it's enjoyable. And then next time, the next and final episode of this whole excursion, we'll talk about some oddball miscellaneous stuff that doesn't really fit into a category,
per se, or doesn't really have year brakes, but it's good information nonetheless. And then also we're going to talk a little bit about just some of the differences between the 70s pickups and the 80s pickups, and what kind of can be interchanged and what isn't, and why, and stuff like that. Not an extensive list on that last part, but I'll go over some of the stuff anyway. And that's all for now. Enjoy, and
Hey, how about a couple mechanical things? What we have here is a frame off of a 74 Club Cab 4-wheel drive. A couple things that I will mention. Again, not gonna go deep into mechanical stuff, but we have the steering gear. It's called a reverse rotation because the pitman arm comes out the side, not the bottom like most stuff. I don't exactly know when they stopped doing this, but most of the stuff I have, it comes out the bottom. So I'm gonna guess 75 was the change year, because 75 was a change year for a lot of things. Just like the cross member. This is the first older 4-wheel drive I've had. By older, I mean pre-75. So this cross member is very different from what you normally have in a 4-wheel drive, and I'll show you that in a second here. So here's a cross member for a 4-wheel drive. This, I think I took this out of a 78, 79, I forget. But anyway, this is what I'm used to seeing. It's a little bit wider. I don't think there's a significant difference, although you look at the motor mounts, you know, there's always two sets. For big block and small block, they go in different holes, and I'm not sure which ones the slant sixes go in off the top of my head. But sometimes, granted this one's all rusty, you can't see, but every now and then you'll actually see where they'll say A and B next to the mounting holes, you know, be it here or here, somewhere in that area. It'll say A and B, so you know whether it's where to put them, because if you start putting an engine in the wrong holes, there's a problem. And there's also a length difference too, so obviously you can probably get them in the other ones, maybe, but then your transmission mount won't line up. So back to this guy, you'll notice that there's just kind of one set of motor mounts, and this was a slant 6, and maybe this is a slant 6 only cross member. I don't know yet. I don't, like I said, I don't have enough of these to know for sure, so I'm just showing you what little information and knowledge I have on that particular part. So let's go back here to the transfer case. This is your divorced transfer case. I'll show you the drive shafts. There's a teeny little drive shaft about that long. Normally between that and the transmission, and it always had to have the short tail shaft transmission. The long tail shaft would probably just about touch that. Oh, what the heck, let's talk about this somewhat odd duck. Here, we've got a slant 6, and we've got the big 11-inch clutch, which I don't believe they had as an option in a car. I could be wrong, but I've never heard of it. So if you're a slant 6 performance enthusiast, this is the kind of animal you get. You can, you know, mount various types of transmissions on the back. They got extra mounting holes, but these bell housings are kind of a pain in the ass, because you'll notice there's no bolts on the outside to attach it to the engine. They're all on the inside. So in order to take that off or put it back on, whichever, you have to take the transmission out, take the clutch off, take the flywheel off, and then you can get in there and get at those bolts with, you know, a ratchet. Not a fun job at all whatsoever. So if you are so inclined to put one of these together, you have been forewarned. So I've got these two axles out of the 74. My axle holder is falling over, but I don't have anything else really to compare them to, at least half-ton wise anyway. So I'll show you this just because I can. I have one. Obviously big bolt pattern, lockout hubs, drum brakes. The divorce transfer case, 72
2, 3, 4 half tons, I believe, were all like this. I don't think they had the disc brake version of this, because when they went to discs, smaller bolt pattern, boom, done. The Dana 44, yeah, and I think the 3/4 tons, which I don't have a 3/4 ton that old, were no different than the slightly newer ones. I don't know if they had drum brakes on or not. I'd have to go through the Hollander's interchange. And this is a rear 8 3/4. You know, drum brakes again, big bolt pattern. This will fit all the way up through, you know, 93 if you wanted to put a 8 3/4 in a pickup. So these are kind of sought after, especially with the big bolt pattern already. It's got 11-inch brakes. They're a little skinnier than the 11s you would find later on, but they're still bigger brakes. I don't know for certain if you could just change the backing plates and the drums over, if all that would transfer over to the point where you could put a little wider brake on. Don't know, but there you go. And these were through 74, and then they went away. Then you either had the 8 3/8, which a lot of people think is an 8 3/4, but vans and pickups, they call them 8 3/8. There's essentially no difference. The difference that I think, I haven't been able to confirm yet, so I'm not going to open my mouth and prove I don't know what I'm talking about there. Then the 9 1/4, which is a fantastic axle. That was also the other half ton. And then of course you get into the 3/4 1 tons in your 60s and 70s and stuff like that. So that's about all for these two axles. Wow, looky here, half ton axles. So there is the 8 3/8, aka 8 1/4. It has the more round differential cover on it. As you can see, that one is well rust proofed. It's very greasy. That is a 9 1/4. It's got the stop sign shaped one. Again, like I said before, a very good axle, very strong. I've got a book in the house. I can't remember the author's name, but he puts the 8 1/4 on the same strength par as a Dana 60. Well, considering they put these in 1-ton vans through the 80s, it's probably right. And since I'm walking around here, and this is laying here too, this is a Dana 60 rear. They all pretty much look the same. I will point out a couple things since I'm here and I can. Let me flip this over here. This is, if it shows up, yeah, it's showing up okay. This is an HD, heavy duty version. And the heavy duties, you know, there's extra ribbing here and back here. I think this is also extra on the HDs. The regular 60s didn't have that. And you kind of, by definition or by default, that's a better way to put it, you got the HD if you got the bigger brakes available in the 3/4 ton. I think all the 1 tons would have been. I've only had 2 1 tons on the yard, so don't quote me on that part of it. And according to the book, the HDs were also supposed to have a little larger diameter axle shaft itself, but the book that I read that in also said that that's not always true. That was kind of a hit or miss type of standard, unfortunately. So you might have a little bigger diameter, and it wasn't much. It was, I don't think it was a 1/8 of an inch bigger shaft diameter on the axle shaft. It was relatively small, but at the same time, those small differences like that can add up to a lot, especially on an axle shaft. So here we have your typical 3/4 ton Dana 44 front. This came out of a 78, so it has the disc brakes. And it's essentially the same as the half ton, although one side is just slightly shorter. I think it's this side, the actual, because of the track width, or let me back up. They're shorter a little bit because the tires on the 3/4 tons, just by matter of fact, are always wider, and so in order to fit underneath the wheel well nice, they had to make the axle assembly a little narrower so everything would fit in there. So it's at least this side. It might actually both, and it's, oh, I want to say it was like a 1/4 inch. It's not much, so you could probably get away with using the 3/4 ton housing, which has a thicker tube thickness on the actual tubes, you could probably get away with putting like this housing, because it's a little bit stiffer, a little stronger in your half-ton, and you could still leave the half-ton hubs on the outside, and I think you'd be fine. I will be experimenting with that in the years to come, just because it's my theory and I want to know, but it's a lot of work to take several axles apart all at the same time and then start comparing apples to apples and see what kind of craziness you can get away with. But, or if somebody actually has done that, please comment in the comment section below, and then I will know, and so will the rest of the world potentially. And yeah, and of course it's possible you could, on the real heavy duty ones, you could have the Dana 60 front. I think on the W400 450s, a Dana 70 was also available, at least on paper. I've never seen one or heard of one, but there's a lot of things that I know exist on paper that I've never seen or heard either, and I am searching for them. So I think that is kind of all I can talk about on axles out here. Sway bars. Let's do the easy one first, the four-wheel drive sway bar, which is right here. These are kind of spun weird, but whatever. Something like that. As far as I know, all the four-wheel drives had pretty much the same layout. 3/4 ton and half tons that I've had all have the same diameter actual shaft. I haven't had any 1 tons, not 1 ton four-wheel drives with front sway bars, so I don't know if they were any different. But basically, as far as I can tell, they will all fit from 72 all the way up to 93. The geometry, the holes in the frame, they all seem to pretty much be the same. Your actual stanchions here, right there, maybe the height changed in those over the years, depending on how much arc there was in the spring itself. So that's the only difference that I can potentially see that I know of. Now we'll talk about two-wheel drive sway bars. So I'll talk about this one back here first. I'll go over here. This is the one I'm sure most of us are by far the most familiar with. This right there, that hooks onto the strut rod that bolts over into the lower control arm. And I've got a 73 with this style. I've taken them off 74s, and then of course anything newer all seem to be this style. Now there's this guy, and the brackets are slightly different, but they seem like they would bolt to about the same spot, because there's this gap right here. There's usually like a hole there for something else. So I think they're basically interchangeable. Only difference is, this came off of a 72 1 ton. And like I said, I've got a 73, this other style. So I don't know if this was like a 1 year only, or if it was a 1 ton thing. I don't know. Finding 50-year-old pickups that haven't been either modified or fixed with whatever parts available to keep them on the road are getting kind of tough. So this is all I have to work with. The difference is, obviously, you can see this little bracketette, whatever you want to call it, small bracket. And that bolts to, let me show you here. So here's a lower control arm. This is where these two bolts are where the strut rod would bolt to. And then these holes, which I've never really seen anything ever in these holes, that's where these things go. It's hard to tell. I'll kind of hold it. So you can kind of see, yeah, they line up. So they do not line up in this one because they're just too far apart. So it's possible those holes were left over from this first generation of sway bar, or maybe this was a dealer installed sway bar and they installed them a little differently, because, and that's very possible, simply because this rubber bushing would go over the that strut rod, and I've never been able to get them off or put them back on without destroying them. So I could see where this maybe would have been a dealer installed thing. And since it's got, decent looking brackets that look about the same. The shape of the sway bar itself is really similar. Minus kind of like this end piece here. I kind of think that one was, especially because this one came off of a 1-ton. It was a camper special. It was a camper 9000, so it was a big camper special. I just don't know enough about those for sure to say one way or the other than it's an odd duck, maybe, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But those for sure, that's probably what you're going to see. And again, they'll fit anything from 72 all the way up to 93 when they change bodies. Control arms, really quick and simple. Uppers, pretty much from 72 all the way through 93 are the same. Left is left, right is right. So B-Vans, pretty much the entire run, 71 through 94, 97, whatever, something like that. They're pretty much all the same. So if you need them, it's pretty easy to find. So with the pickups anyway, a lot of times they'll rot out around this or down in these troughs where they get full of dirt and crap. For some reason, I've never seen vans rot out there, and I couldn't tell you exactly why, other than the fact that vans probably aren't driven in the same kind of environment that pickups are. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. Lower control arms, slightly different story with those. The pickups, they run 72 all the way to 93, half tons, and for lack of a better term, we'll call it the light 3/4 tons were the same. They're left and right interchangeable. The heavy 3/4, 1 tons, a little different in where the spring sits, kind of right in here, is recessed a little deeper, so they can get an extra coil, extra twist in the coil spring. So that actually helps the geometry as far as ride control and weight capacity, that kind of stuff. And then also with the bigger ones, if it's got a recess in it, if it's the 3/4 ton, whatever, this rear bushing is wider, and the bolt is significantly larger too. So they won't really, you can't interchange those unless it's 3/4, 1 ton. The other thing to mention, like I say, and then the half tons, yeah, like they run all the way up. Vans are the same, again, with that half ton, 3/4 ton split thing, up through 78. And then in 79 and up, they recess this a little deeper so you can get that extra coil in that spring. You better ride control, all that other stuff. So if you wanted to, say, lower your truck a little bit in the front, you can get lower control arms out of an 80s whatever Dodge van and then use your original springs. So you'll essentially, move the lower control arm up, which, drops the entire front end of the truck, if you're so inclined. Yeah, I think that's about it for lower control arms. That's enough anyway. All right, half-ton wheels. I'll talk about 3/4 tons later. It's a different video. It'll look kind of weird because it's at a different time. Half-ton wheels. Essentially, if you could get it on a car, you could probably get it on a pickup. As far as the optional wheels. And the stock Steelies, and these are all 15 by 6.5. They're all the same, but they're not. And I'll explain those in a little bit. So the minimum size or minimum width, other than the 4-wheel drive 7234, they had a completely different wheel because different bolt pattern, etc. The 2-wheel drives had ones that were basically like this. The 15 by 5.5s, I don't have any of those on that I can get to because I turn them all into scabs or other stuff. I only keep the 6.5s around for things. So there's, oddly enough, there's 3 different versions of this. So we've got 4 nubs, 4 nubs, and then there's 3 nubs. Big deal. Put a center cap over it. You'll never know. So the differences go from there. One of the main differences between this one and the other ones is, I don't know how well it's going to, it kind of shows up. So the disc itself, kind of flattens out and then hits the rim at essentially a 90-degree angle, kind of. So, and then it sits a lot closer to this brake line. Does it matter? Not that I know. I couldn't tell you if it really matters or not. Other than if you're just going to do the stock steelies, paint them body color, whatever, you know, you might want all of them at least to look the same here. I doubt anybody's ever going to notice, but there's always that one guy at a car show that'll point it out. You know, deal with it. So, like I say, you know, 99 times out of 100, nobody's ever going to see that difference versus this difference. But if you're like me and you've got access to enough of them, you just match them all up to whatever you're putting on, and then at least in your own mind, you're not double guessing yourself. And then, let me move a couple of these around here. I should have had these positioned a little better. And these look almost the same. Sometimes when I look at them, this little divot here, sometimes will look slightly different between the 3 nubber and the 4 nubber, but that might just be perspective or just kind of the way they got stamped a little bit. It's nothing super noticeable, but every now and then I'll look at it and go like, are they different or not? I don't know. But like I say, there's really no difference. The easiest way to tell the difference was just a stock steely between a 5.5 and a 6.5. 6.5s have like a 1/2 inch gap between the rim and where the disc hits, with the exception of this other one that's kind of got the flat landing. That's almost the 5.5s will be almost right on that, like right up to there. That's the stock steelies, the baseline stock steelies. All the pickups were always painted that white, this off-white color. So if you've got black, like a factory black stock steely, like that one over there, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit, they're not originally off of a pickup. Does it matter? Not a hill of beans, really. You've got the stock steelies, the wide ones. You go 5.5, 6.5, then you'll hit 7, 7.5, 8. I don't think there's 8.5 in the stock steely, like this style looking rim. Those are considered optional wheels for obvious reasons, because you had to option them up. They weren't just standard. And I couldn't tell you for sure if all the 4-wheel drives had 6.5s and the 2-wheels had 5.5 as a base wheel, because I've seen both on both. But then after, you know, a few decades, wheels and tires get swapped around pretty quick and easy. So interesting thing, you know, 5.5, 6.5, the stock base wheels are always half sizes. You won't find a 15x6 stock steel, except this guy. This is a stock steel 6-inch. And what this actually is, other than it not having any air vents in it, this is all the stock looking steel 15x6s are odd because they're all spare tires, and as far as I know, they only came in cars. The reason why it's odd is because the optional wheels, your aluminums, your chromes, your ones with all the little slots cut in them, whatever, they were available in even sizes. And if you optioned up fancy wheels, but you didn't option for a matching spare, but you optioned for a matching size, like a matching tire, they would make sure they put it on a matching size rim. I know that gets a little confusing, but if you think about it, it makes sense. So they had these that were just basically stock steel wheels, but with just a different wheel itself. So like I say, it's a weird gray area. So generally speaking, if someone says it's got 15x6s on it, it probably has 15x5.5s, because most people don't know how to measure a rim right. You measure inside to inside. A lot of people will measure outside to outside, and they'll get at least a 1/2 inch more than what it should be. And even if you've got the nice wheel, the giant plastic caliper, I've got one hanging on the wall in here. people measure those and still like get the size wrong because they don't know how to adjust for this. And the aluminum ones are off a little farther when you measure from the outside because the aluminum is thicker. There are some wheels you can get on pickups, not on cars, but usually, for the most part, the other way around. You get it on a car, you get it on a pickup. Or if nothing else, the dealer would certainly put it on. They would put any tire on anything, wheel and tire on anything for the right kind of money. I think that's about all I can really talk about that I can actually show you too. I've got some, I've got factory optional wheels all over the place. You know, the wagon wheels, I got a couple, 3 different sizes, widths of those. I've got a couple of the Little Red Express, you know, chrome 5 slots floating around. I've got a couple sets of the 7.5, you know, stock steely looking ones. But I'm not going to dig all those out because I think everybody knows what a rim looks like. I probably bored you to death already blabbing about, you know, minor details that nobody in their right mind is going to care about except somebody like me. I think that's about all I can yak about for this. Here's your 2 versions of your 16-inch. This is your one-piece wheel. Pretty typical and common. Say hi, cat. There we go. And then there's your split rim 16. Yes, they still had these available as late as 78. I haven't seen them on 79 or newer. But there's really nothing wrong with a split rim if you know what you're doing. And of course the cat's got to make his appearance again. So, and then far as other wheels, they had 16.5s. And of course then the dually versions of the 16.5s, the dually versions of the 16 one-piece. They had dually versions of the split rim 16. And that's pretty much everything for the 3/4 ton, 1 ton pickups. Right, cat?